She was once the face of women's MMA, undefeated, unstoppable, and hailed as a global icon. But now, Ronda Rousey has lost everything. The fame, the respect, the spotlight, it's all gone. What began as a meteoric rise turned into one of the most shocking downfalls in sports history. From UFC dominance to devastating defeats, public backlash, and a desperate pivot to wrestling, her story has unraveled in tragic fashion. In this video, we're going to break it all down, from the rise to the collapse, and reveal the truth behind how Ronda Rousey went from a queen of the cage to a forgotten figure in combat sports. Before the headlines, the gold belts, or the deafening applause, Ronda Rousey was simply a girl born into struggle. On February 1st, 1987, in Riverside, California, she entered the world not with a cry, but with silence, choked by her own umbilical cord. Deprived of oxygen at birth, Ronda suffered significant speech delays, unable to form full sentences until she was 6. But from this very first breath, adversity became her closest companion. And that adversity, as cruel as it was, began to forge someone with an iron will. Her mother, Anne Maria DeMars, wasn't just a parent, she was a world-class judo champion, the first American to win gold at the World Judo Championships, and she had no intention of raising a daughter who would settle for less. The Rousey household didn't run on praise or participation trophies. It ran on grit, discipline, and an unshakable belief in hard work. At a time when most kids were just learning to ride bikes, Ronda was being slammed to the mat over and over again, learning to fall and, more importantly, how to rise. By 17, she was already an Olympic-level athlete. At 21, she made history, becoming the first American woman to earn a medal in judo at the Olympics, taking bronze in Beijing in 2008. But instead of celebration, Ronda felt lost. Judo had given her a foundation, but what came next? Broke, emotionally burned out, and battling depression, she took a job as a bartender in Venice Beach, living out of her car at times, barely scraping by. And then came the sport that would define her: mixed martial arts. MMA wasn't just a path forward, it was a rebirth. Rousey, with her judo background, tenacity, and disdain for mediocrity, entered the cage like a hurricane. In 2011, she won her debut in 25 seconds. By 2012, she was the Strikeforce bantamweight champion. And by 2013, she was the face of the UFC, literally changing Dana White's mind about women ever fighting in the octagon. She wasn't just winning, she was obliterating. Finishes came in under a minute. Her armbar became a weapon of folklore. Fans didn't ask if she'd win, they asked how fast. But all storms carry within them the seeds of their own destruction. And as Ronda's star rose, so too did something far more dangerous: the belief that she could never fall. With every dominant win, Ronda Rousey's confidence ballooned. But confidence has a twin: arrogance. And by 2015, it was nearly impossible to tell them apart in her case. She walked into press conferences with the swagger of a heavyweight. She dismissed opponents before fights even began. Her public statements grew bolder, louder, and more bizarre. She declared herself capable of beating Floyd Mayweather in a boxing match. She claimed defeat was something that happened only if you allowed it to. She wasn't just the champion of a weight class, she was trying to be the embodiment of dominance itself. But behind the facade of invincibility, there were cracks. Teammates and critics alike began noticing that her training didn't evolve. She stayed loyal to Edmond Tarverdian, her coach, despite mounting criticism of his methods. Under his guidance, her striking never sharpened. Her footwork remained wooden, her head movement non-existent. But Rousey didn't care. She wasn't just winning, she was bulldozing the competition. Why change? Media coverage only fueled her ego. Magazine covers, movie deals, and red carpet appearances became frequent. Hollywood embraced her. She appeared in Furious 7, Entourage, and was rumored to be the next big female action star. She wasn't just a fighter anymore, she was a celebrity, an icon, and in her mind, untouchable. But the danger of buying into your own myth is that reality doesn't stop evolving just because you refuse to. While Ronda was being photographed for glossy covers, fighters like Holly Holm were quietly grinding in the gym. gym. While Ronda was rehearsing WWE cameos and talk show appearances, Amanda Nunes was sharpening her hands with knockout precision, and fans started to notice. The more Ronda bragged, the more she became polarizing. Gone was the humble Olympian who rose from hardship. In her place stood a woman who mocked her opponents, insulted journalists, and refused to respect the sports code. Her fall wasn't just coming, it was being summoned, one soundbite at a time. But no one, not even her most vocal critics, could have predicted just how sudden and brutal it would be. November 14, 2015, UFC 193, Melbourne, Australia. Over 56,000 fans packed Etihad Stadium. Millions more tuned in worldwide. Ronda Rousey entered the octagon as the undefeated, undisputed queen of MMA. She was 12-0, the face of the sport, and most believed she would steamroll yet another opponent. That opponent was Holly Holm, a former boxing world champion, quiet, respectful, and vastly underestimated. But Holm wasn't there to be a stepping stone. She was there to make a statement, and in less than 2 rounds, she did exactly that. From the opening bell, it was clear something was off. Rousey looked tense, wild, and desperate to impose her will. She charged forward recklessly, trying to clinch, trying to make it a judo match. But Holm, calm and precise, danced out of range, popping Rousey with jabs and leg kicks. The champion couldn't adjust. She had no plan B. She was outclassed in every exchange. And then, in round 2, the kick landed. A perfectly timed left high kick that smashed into Ronda's neck and jaw, dropping her like a rag doll. The roar of the crowd turned into stunned silence. The invincible had been destroyed. The aftermath was worse. Ronda didn't stay to congratulate Holm. She didn't attend the post-fight presser. She vanished, flown out of Australia in silence, with a busted lip and a bruised ego. The woman who once declared she was unbeatable had been publicly humiliated. And the world didn't just watch. It celebrated. Memes flooded the internet. Commentators who once sang her praises tore her down. And perhaps most painful of all, her fans, the ones who once called her a goddess, began to turn. But instead of humility or redemption, Rousey chose silence. For months, she disappeared from the spotlight, and when she returned, it was on Ellen, tearfully admitting she'd considered ending her life after the loss. Rather than earning sympathy, many saw the interview as manipulative, a calculated PR move to avoid responsibility. The mystique was shattered. The aura of dominance had been exposed as illusion, and what came next would only bury her deeper. 13 months after her devastating loss to Holly Holm, Ronda Rousey returned to the UFC at UFC 207 on December 30, 2016. But something was different, eerily different. She didn't do any media, no interviews, no open workouts, no press conferences. It was the complete opposite of the Ronda fans had once known: loud, brash, and dominating every headline. This time, she walked in like a ghost, silent, distant, fragile. Her opponent was Amanda Nunes, the new champion, a heavy hitter with a chip on her shoulder and a fire in her fists. But Ronda never seemed to grasp that this wasn't the same game anymore. The women's division had evolved, the fighters had evolved. Ronda hadn't. She hadn't fought in over a year. She hadn't tested her striking, and she had doubled down on her controversial coach, Edmond Tarverdian, a man many blamed for her outdated techniques and lack of evolution. Left broken. Even her most die-hard supporters had to admit this was the end. But it wasn't just the loss that devastated her. It was how the world responded. Unlike before, there was no redemption arc. The world didn't wait for her to bounce back. The internet tore her apart with ruthless glee. Fighters mocked her striking. Pundits dissected her failures. The aura was not just cracked, it was pulverized. And behind the scenes, Ronda was crumbling under the weight of it all. After disappearing from MMA, Ronda Rousey re-emerged not as a fighter, but as a WWE performer. In 2018, she debuted at WrestleMania, smiling, waving, playing the role of a scripted superstar. Fans were initially excited. Maybe this was the beginning of her rebirth, but something was off. Even in the colorful world of pro wrestling, where everyone wears masks, Ronda's felt forced. Her smile looked hollow. Her promos felt robotic. And worst of all, her fire was gone. Her WWE run, while successful in ratings, exposed a painful truth. Ronda didn't seem to know who she was anymore. She wasn't an Olympic judoka. She wasn't the dominant UFC champ. And she certainly wasn't a charismatic, crowd-loving entertainer. She was stuck between worlds, clinging to an identity that no longer fit. In interviews, she struggled to even talk about her UFC days. On a podcast, she admitted, "It was hard when I was no longer the best in the world." She even attacked the very fans who once idolized her, calling them fickle and ungrateful. Behind the curtain, her WWE run was filled with tension. Reports circulated that Ronda clashed with producers, refused to do certain storylines, and often broke character on live TV. She wasn't happy, she wasn't fulfilled, and worst of all, she was now known as something she never thought she'd be: divisive. Her relationship with fame became toxic. The same spotlight that once fueled her now burned her. Every time she tried to reinvent herself, it felt inauthentic. The world had moved on. The division she built now belonged to Amanda Nunes, Valentina Shevchenko, and others who had passed her skill level by miles. In a particularly emotional moment during an interview with Dax Shepard, Ronda revealed how lost she felt after losing her status as the baddest woman on the planet. "I was just trying to be appreciated again," she said quietly, trying to find purpose. The woman who once demanded attention now seemed terrified of it, and for the first time, it looked like Ronda Rousey, the fighter, the icon, the lightning rod, was no longer fighting anyone, not even herself. She was simply fading. Today, Ronda Rousey lives on a ranch in Southern California, far from the octagon, far from the ring, and far from the cameras that once defined her every move. On the surface, it may seem like peace, but for those who've followed her journey closely, it feels like exile. Her appearances are rare, her tone is often bitter, and the fire that once made her unstoppable has been replaced with silence and shadows. Her autobiography, Our Fight, released in 2024, should have been a triumphant return, a moment of reflection, healing, and reconnection. But instead, it painted a darker picture. In the book, Ronda spoke about feeling suicidal after her loss to home, her deep resentment toward MMA fans, and her struggle to connect with the world outside of combat. She wrote, "The fighter in me died in that cage, and I've never felt truly alive since." Even her family life has been tinged with sadness. In 2021, she gave birth to her first child, a daughter named Laiakia, but motherhood, which many assumed would be her redemption arc, hasn't fully healed the wounds. Ronda admitted in interviews that she still wakes up with a sense of panic, unsure of who she's supposed to be. "I don't even know if I like fighting," she said at one point, a haunting admission from someone who once embodied it. Financially, things have also been uncertain. While she earned millions during her UFC and WWE runs, many of her endorsement deals have faded. She's no longer the face of Reebok. No more EA Sports cover. The movie offers have dried up, and without a clear role in entertainment or sports, she's become a ghost of her former self, living off past glory while the present grows quieter by the day. What's most tragic isn't that Ronda Rousey lost her belt, it's that she lost her identity. The silence that surrounds her now isn't peaceful, it's suffocating. The once indestructible icon now seems to live in retreat, disconnected from the world that once adored her, unable to find the fire that once lit her soul. And that's not just tragic, it's heartbreaking. At one time, Ronda Rousey was the name on every screen, but today, at 38 years old, she's nowhere to be found. No press tours, no podcast interviews, no red carpet appearances. For someone once addicted to competition and public validation, the silence surrounding her now is eerie. Some would call it peace, but others, those who know her history, see something darker: burnout, disillusionment, and emotional withdrawal. After WWE, Ronda didn't sprint to her next big thing. Instead, she quietly pulled back. Her social media presence grew sporadic, and when she did post, it was less about fame and more about the homestead, goats, gardens, and chickens on her farm. Fans called it wholesome, but to those who listened closely, it sounded like someone recovering from deep trauma, someone who had been fed to the machine. and barely crawled out alive. She once admitted, "I wanted to disappear. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to exist." Her retreat from the spotlight wasn't just a life choice, it was a survival strategy. Friends close to her have revealed that Ronda struggled for years with deep-rooted anxiety and depression following her UFC losses. The image of invincibility shattered. She retreated inward, spending more time in therapy than in training. And her personal relationships? They took a hit too. Though she remains married to Travis Brown, insiders have whispered about emotional distance. The power couple persona they once projected has faded, replaced by quiet appearances and rumors of stress. There's no scandal, no headlines, just a painful question that looms: where did Ronda go? The more you dig, the clearer it becomes. Ronda isn't just taking a break, she's recovering from the toll of years spent being everybody else's icon while losing her own identity. It's tragic because she didn't just step away, she vanished. Despite the perception of fame and fortune, the financial picture for Ronda Rousey isn't as golden as many believe. After cashing in big during her peak years, championship fights, film roles, and WWE contracts, Ronda seemed set for life. But behind the scenes, there are signs that the money may not have lasted. Fighter pay during Ronda's UFC tenure was notoriously lower than today's top-tier payouts. Her biggest disclosed payday in MMA was $3 million for the Nunes fight. Huge, but not enough to retire on after taxes, management cuts, and expenses. And with her film career stalling and WWE appearances drying up, her income stream has slowed dramatically. She's also invested heavily into her farm lifestyle, land, animals, and infrastructure, reportedly pouring millions into developing her property. While it looks peaceful from the outside, those costs add up fast, especially when sponsorship deals and media appearances fade. Ronda once said, "I'm a doomsday prepper. I want to be self-sustaining." But some believe her homestead isn't just a dream, it's an escape plan, a place to hide when the checks stop coming. But maybe more than the money is the legacy crisis. Ronda's image was built on dominance, on being the baddest woman on the planet. But how does someone like that process the reality that their name, once chanted in arenas, is now met with silence, or worse, online ridicule? Even the UFC rarely mentions her anymore. She's been passed by in the conversation about GOATs, replaced by Amanda Nunes, Valentina Shevchenko, and new names rising fast. The legacy she fought to create now feels like a memory, blurred by brutal knockouts and fan betrayal. There's a heartbreaking irony here. The woman who changed the sport now feels forgotten by it. That emptiness, that lingering shadow over what could have been, it doesn't just haunt her bank account, it haunts her heart. And now, at 38, we're watching a living legend fade in real time, not from scandal, not from disgrace, but from exhaustion. Ronda Rousey isn't doing interviews, she's not writing books, she's not launching brands, she's retreating, quietly, deliberately. But the question is it healing or is it surrender? Fans hoped she'd come back, maybe coach the Ultimate Fighter, maybe take a front office role, maybe even commentate women's fights, but none of that happened. Ronda stayed silent. Her response to UFC 300's historic moment? Nothing. No tweets, no excitement, no reflection. It's as if she's erasing her connection to the sport entirely. Even her WWE colleagues noted her emotional absence. Former stars have said she never really connected backstage, and that you could tell she didn't want to be there anymore. And that's the tragedy. Ronda Rousey, once a cultural force, now drifts further from the world she helped shape. Those close to her say she still carries pain, still has nightmares about the home fight, still feels betrayed by fans who turned on her when she fell. "They don't love you," she once said. "They love what you do for them." It's a brutal realization for someone who gave everything, only to find herself alone when she needed support the most. So where does that leave us? With a sobering truth, the rise was fast, the fall was brutal, and the aftermath is eerily quiet. Ronda Rousey, at just 38 years old, lives in isolation, burdened by what was and what could have been. The tragedy isn't that she lost a fight, it's that she lost herself trying to become everything the world wanted her to be. And now, as she walks her land in silence, the cheers long gone, we're left wondering, will she ever come back? Or has Ronda already said her last word to the world that once worshipped her?